My name is Thea Onslow. I'm 25 years old, and 3 hours ago I walked into a boardroom, laid a stack of documents on the table, and watched my dad's face drain of every last drop of color, because he just found out that the daughter he'd spent 25 years calling the dumb one now owns 51% of his company. But before I tell you how that happened, I need to take you back to the moment that started everything. The moment I sat in the back row at my sister's Harvard graduation, invisible, while my parents told 200 people I was the family's biggest disappointment. Before we get into this, if you end up liking this story, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy it. I never ask unless I mean it. And drop where you're watching from and your local time in the comments. I love knowing who's out there. Now let me take you back to last Saturday morning, 6:15 a.m., the day my sister graduated from Harvard Business School, the day my family handed her everything, and the day a stranger walked up to me and changed my life with a single envelope. Saturday, 6:15 in the morning, and the Onslow house was already running like a campaign headquarters. My father, Gerald Onslow, stood in the kitchen in his navy Tom Ford suit, barking orders into his phone. Mom, Vivian, had been upstairs with Sloane for over an hour, adjusting her outfit, steaming her gown, curling her hair. The whole house smelled like Sloane's perfume and fresh espresso. Me? I was in the laundry room, ironing my father's backup shirt, just in case. "Thea, did you pick up the flowers?" Mom called down the stairs without looking at me. "In the car already." "And the card? The one from the partners?" "Signed and sealed." She didn't say thank you. She never did. I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror, a navy dress I'd bought on clearance at Nordstrom Rack, $42. I'd saved for 3 weeks. Nobody asked what I was wearing. Nobody asked if I was ready. Sloane came down the staircase in a cream silk dress with a matching blazer. Custom. The kind of outfit that whispered money before you even heard her name. Dad looked up from his phone, and his face, I'll never forget this, his whole face softened. "There she is," he said, "Harvard's finest." Mom took out her phone. Photos, a dozen of them. Gerald and Sloane, Vivian and Sloane, all 3 of them together. The hired photographer was already outside, adjusting his lens against the early sun. I stood in the hallway holding an extra garment bag, waiting. "Thea, you're riding in the second car," Dad said without turning around. "This one's for family photos." I am family, but I put the garment bag in the trunk of the second car and didn't say a word. I should explain something about my family. The Onslows own a real estate development company, Onslow Properties, based in Coventry, Connecticut, founded in 1987 by my grandparents. My grandmother, Eleanor Onslow, put in the first dollar. My grandfather put in the second. Together they built it into a $40 million operation. Residential developments, commercial lots, mixed-use projects across 3 counties. When Grandpa died, Dad took the wheel, and he drove it like a man who believed the company was born from his hands alone. I started working at Onslow Properties 3 years ago, right after I got my real estate license. I studied harder for that exam than most people will ever know. Audiobooks on repeat, text-to-speech software reading statutes while I drew diagrams on legal pads. Because I have dyslexia, always have, letters rearrange themselves on the page like furniture in a room I didn't decorate. Dad's response when I passed? "Good, you can help with the filing." 3 years. That's how long I spent answering phones, sorting mail, and standing next to the copier. I watched agents half my age walk into meetings I wasn't allowed to attend. I watched my father promote a man who once asked me where the bathroom was, because he thought I was the cleaning staff. One time, I drafted an email to a prospective buyer, misspelled 2 words. Dad printed it out, walked to the break room, and pinned it on the bulletin board. Underneath, in his handwriting, "This is why some people should stick to copying." I found it during lunch. 3 co-workers were reading it. One of them looked at me. I pulled the pin out, folded the paper, and put it in my jacket pocket. I still have it. My grandmother once told me, "You see what others can't, Thea." She died 2 years ago, and I thought she'd taken that belief with her. In the second car, a rented sedan, not the family's Escalade, I sat alone with the garment bag on the seat beside me like a quiet passenger. The drive from Coventry to Cambridge was 2 hours. I played an audiobook on low volume and watched Connecticut dissolve into Massachusetts through a rain-streaked window. My phone buzzed around mile 60. Dad's voice on speaker in the Escalade ahead of me. Mom must have accidentally pocket-dialed my number. I almost hung up. Then I heard it. "Yeah, the Tesla's being delivered to her apartment tomorrow. Red. She'll lose her mind." Mom laughed. Then, "And Gerald, tell her about the property." "At the dinner. I want to see her face." "She deserves it." A pause. Then Dad again. "The Manhattan townhouse. It's going into Sloane's name this week. I talked to accounting." $13 million. A 4-story brownstone on the Upper East Side that my grandfather bought in 1984. I'd been inside once, when I was 9. Grandma showed me the rooftop and said, "Someday, this will mean something to the family." I thought she meant all of us. "Sloane, after your MBA, you'll come on as VP of Acquisitions," Dad continued. "We're building this for you." Nobody mentioned me. Nobody said, "What about Thea?" I was 40 yards behind them on I-84, holding a garment bag and listening to my own erasure in real time. Then a text, unknown number. "Ms. Onslow, are you attending the ceremony today? I need to confirm. M. Caldwell." I stared at the name. Margaret Caldwell. I didn't know a Margaret Caldwell. I typed back, "Yes, who is this?" No reply. I set the phone down on the garment bag and kept driving. I didn't know it yet, but that text was the first thread of everything that was about to unravel. Harvard Business School, Spangler Center, the kind of building that smells like old money and fresh ambition. The ceremony hall was packed, 230 guests, maybe more. Rows of polished chairs, flowers on every ledge, banners with the Harvard crest catching soft light from tall windows. Dad and Mom were in row 2, just behind the faculty. Reserved seats, gold name cards on the chairs. Gerald Onslow, class patron donor. He gave $200,000 to the business school last year. That buys you second-row seats and a speaking slot. I found my seat. Row 19, last row, between a woman I'd never met and an empty chair. Mom had told me on the phone the night before. "There's limited seating up front. It's for close family." I am close family. I looked around the hall. Other families sat together, bunched in clusters, elbowing each other, whispering, laughing. A mother fixed her son's tie. A father held his daughter's purse while she adjusted her cap. Normal things, warm things. My family was 70 feet ahead of me. Dad leaned over and whispered something to Mom. She laughed and put her hand on his arm. They didn't turn around once. I reached for the ceremony program on my chair. There wasn't one. "Here," said the woman beside me. 60-ish, silver hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain. She held out her copy. "Take mine. I've already read it twice." "Thank you," she smiled. I opened the program and read Sloane's name. Sloane Onslow, MBA candidate, cum laude. My sister, the one they chose. I closed the program, and then I noticed the woman near the exit door. Silver-haired, charcoal blazer, standing rather than sitting. She was watching me. When our eyes met, she gave a single, slow nod. I didn't know her, but something in my chest told me she knew me. The dean introduced my father as a pillar of American enterprise and a proud Harvard parent. The audience clapped. Dad walked to the podium like he was stepping onto a stage he was born to occupy. He started with Sloane. Of course he did. "My daughter Sloane is everything a father could hope for. Brilliant, driven, top of her class. She is the future of Onslow Properties. And I say that not just as her father, but as the CEO of a company that needs leaders exactly like her." The room applauded. Mom dabbed her eyes with a tissue she'd definitely pre-positioned. Then Dad shifted his weight, lowered his voice half a note. The way he does when he's about to say something he thinks is clever. You know, as parents, we learn early which child will carry the torch. He paused. And which one, well, a small shrug, a smile that was almost a wink. Let's just say not everyone is built for this. Laughter. 200 people laughing at a joke I was the punchline of. A woman in the third row turned around and glanced toward the back, like she was looking for the other one, the defective one. I sat still. I kept my face neutral. I'd had 25 years of practice. Dad finished big. Sloan, everything I've built, it's yours. The company, the legacy, everything. Sloan walked to the stage. She hugged Dad. She kissed Mom. She thanked her professors. She thanked her study group. She thanked the barista at her favorite Cambridge coffee shop. She didn't say my name, not once. 230 people in that room. And my sister thanked a barista before she thought of me. I folded my hands in my lap and watched the woman by the exit door. She was still watching me. She hadn't clapped once. Here's what runs through your mind when you've been invisible your whole life, and someone just confirmed it in front of 200 witnesses. If I stay silent, nothing changes. Dad will name Sloan VP of Acquisitions on Monday. She'll move into the corner office, the one with the window that looks out over the town square, the one Grandma used to sit in. Within a year, Gerald will restructure the company shares. Sloan will own the majority. I'll still be on the third floor next to the copier. $32,000 a year. That's my salary. The administrative assistant rate. I have a real estate license. I once identified a waterfront parcel in Old Saybrook that tripled in value within 14 months. Dad bought it without ever knowing I was the one who flagged it. Ray Whitfield, our project manager, told me quietly, "You should have gotten credit for that." I didn't. Sloan's graduation gift, a Tesla, a $13 million townhouse, a vice presidency. My graduation gift, 3 years ago, when I got my license, Dad said, "Good, you can help with the filing." That's the math. That's what silence costs. But it wasn't the money that made my hands shake in that auditorium seat. It was something Grandma Eleanor told me once, a year before she died. We were sitting on her back porch in Coventry, watching the leaves turn, and she grabbed my hand and said, "Don't ever let them define you, Thea. Promise me." I promised. And if I sat in that back row and swallowed one more insult and smiled through one more joke about the dumb one, I was breaking that promise. I checked my phone, the text from M. Caldwell. Still no reply. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew this. If I didn't do something, today of all days, I never would. The after-party was at a private dining room in a Cambridge restaurant that had a name I couldn't pronounce, and a wine list longer than my lease. 50 guests, white tablecloths, waiters in black vests. Dad stood at the head of the table, champagne in hand, and clinked his glass. "I want to make a few things official," he said. The room quieted. As of Monday, Sloan Onslow will join Onslow Properties as Vice President of Acquisitions. Applause. Sloan covered her mouth with her hand like she hadn't practiced the expression in the mirror. Mom added, beaming, "And we're transferring the Manhattan property into Sloan's name this week. Our girl earned it." A man across the table, Frank DeLuca, one of Dad's business partners, leaned forward. "What about your other daughter? Thea, right?" The table went quiet for one beat. Dad chuckled. "Thea helps around the office. Somebody has to answer the phones." Laughter. Not mean, exactly. Worse. Casual. Like I was a running joke they'd all heard before. I bit the inside of my cheek. Under the table, my fist closed so tight my nails left half-moons in my palm. Then the door opened. A woman walked in. Silver hair. Charcoal blazer. The same woman from the ceremony. The one who'd been watching me from the exit. She moved through the room with the kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly where she's going. She stopped at my chair, set a thick manila envelope on the table in front of me, leaned down. "Your grandmother asked me to give you this on your 25th birthday. That's today." Her voice was low, steady. "Now's the time to show them who you really are." The table stared. Dad's champagne glass stopped midway to his mouth. I looked at the envelope. My fingers trembled as I pulled the flap open. Okay, I need to pause here for a second. I'm sitting at a table, holding an envelope from my dead grandmother, in the middle of my sister's graduation party, while my dad is literally toasting to a future that doesn't include me. And I have no idea what's inside. If this is the kind of story that keeps you watching, hit subscribe. Because what happens next? Even I didn't see it coming. Drop a comment and tell me what you think is in that envelope. Now, back to the restaurant. Back to the envelope. I didn't open it at the table. I stood up, tucked the envelope under my arm, and walked to the restroom without a word. The woman, Margaret Caldwell, I'd learn, followed me. The restroom was marble and soft light. I locked the door. My hands shook so hard the envelope nearly slipped twice. Inside, 2 pages of handwritten stationery, Grandma's cursive, looping and sure, and behind them a thick stack of legal documents bound with a blue cover page. The header read, Eleanor Onslow Irrevocable Trust, amended and restated. Margaret stood near the door, hands folded, giving me space. I looked at Grandma's letter first. The handwriting blurred, the way it always does when I try to read under stress. I blinked, tried again. The letters rearranged themselves. Would you like me to read it to you? Margaret asked. No pity, just a question. I nodded. She took the pages gently and read, Thea, if you're reading this, then today is your 25th birthday, and I'm no longer around to say this in person. So I'll say it here. You see what others can't. You always have. You look at a piece of land, and you see the neighborhood it could become. You look at people, and you see who they really are. That is a kind of intelligence no diploma can teach. I've placed 51% of Onslow properties into this trust. It's yours now, not because your father failed, but because I believe you're the right person to lead. Don't use this for revenge, Thea. Use it to build. I pressed my back against the wall. The cold marble steadied me. As of 12:01 this morning, Margaret said, the trust transfer is in effect. You are the controlling shareholder of Onslow Properties. Does my father know? No. Eleanor made me promise. My legs nearly buckled, but I stayed standing. I stood in that marble restroom for 6 minutes. I know because I watched the seconds on my phone. Margaret leaned against the counter, quiet, patient. She had the posture of a woman who'd been holding this secret for 11 years and was finally allowed to set it down. There's a board meeting Monday morning, she said. 9 a.m. Your grandmother planned the timing. She planned this? Down to the month. The trust activates on your 25th birthday. She chose today. I almost laughed. Grandma Eleanor, the woman who once hand-drew blueprints on napkins at diners, had mapped out this moment a decade before it arrived. She didn't just leave me shares, she left me a strategy. But standing there, hands still trembling, a question hit me harder than any inheritance. Was I doing this for the right reason? Margaret seemed to read my face. Your grandmother didn't do this out of revenge. She did it because she believed you were the right person to lead. I closed my eyes, and I was 12 again. Standing on a muddy lot off Route 9 in Glastonbury, wind in my face, Grandma beside me. She'd pointed at the empty field and asked, What do you see? Dad would have seen cheap acreage. Sloane would have seen nothing. I saw morning sunlight hitting the eastern slope. I saw a school being built 2 miles down the road. I saw the highway exit that would make commuting easy. If you built homes here, I told her, people would want to live in them. She smiled. That's why, Thea. I didn't understand then. I do now. I opened my eyes. I'm not going to make a scene at my sister's party, I told Margaret. Monday, the boardroom. That's where this happens. She nodded. Eleanor would approve. I came back to the table with a face that gave away nothing. 25 years of being the quiet one has its advantages. You learn how to fold every feeling into a small, tight square and tuck it behind your ribs. Margaret left through the side door. Nobody noticed her go. "Where were you?" Dad said, barely glancing up. "Don't disappear like that." "Restroom." He grunted and turned back to the table. Sloane was opening gifts, a Cartier bracelet from Mom, a leather portfolio from Dad's partners, and the main event. Dad slid a small red velvet box across the tablecloth. Sloane opened it. Inside, a Tesla key fob, bright red logo. She screamed. She actually screamed. "Daddy!" She jumped up and hugged him. Mom filmed the whole thing. The table erupted, clapping, laughing. Someone said, "That's unreal." And it was unreal. All of it. The gifts, the speeches, the assumption that this family had only one daughter worth celebrating. Unreal. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the old sting. I sat there watching my father hand my sister the keys to a car that cost more than 3 years of my salary, and I felt something new. Clarity. Dad caught my eye across the table. "You could learn a thing or two from your sister Thea. Hard work pays off." "It does," I said. He didn't catch it. He wouldn't. Not until Monday. Before I left the restaurant that night, I stepped outside into the Cambridge air and texted Ray Whitfield. "Ray, I need the company's current project portfolio. Every active deal. By tomorrow night." 3 dots. Then, "Everything okay?" "It will be." I drove back to Connecticut alone in the rental sedan. 2 hours. No audiobook this time. Just the hum of the highway and the envelope on the passenger seat. Sunday. My apartment is a studio in East Hartford. 600 square feet. A kitchen that's really just a corner with a stove. A fold-out desk I bought secondhand. It costs $900 a month, which is exactly what I can afford on $32,000 a year after taxes. Margaret sent a courier at 8 a.m. Inside, the full certified trust document, 53 pages. She included a note. "Call me if you need anything read aloud. MC." I set my laptop on the fold-out desk, plugged in my earbuds, and opened the text-to-speech software I've used since high school. The robotic voice read every clause while I drew diagrams on a yellow legal pad. Boxes, arrows, circles. That's how my brain processes information. Not in lines, in shapes. By noon, I understood the trust inside and out. Eleanor Onslow, co-founder, had held 51% of Onslow properties in her personal name. She transferred those shares into an irrevocable trust in 2015, with Margaret Caldwell as trustee and me as sole beneficiary. The trust stipulated transfer upon my 25th birthday. My father held 49%, inherited from my grandfather. He ran the company. He made every decision, but he never owned the majority. Grandma did. At 2 p.m., Ray emailed the project portfolio. I went through it deal by deal, and that's when I found 2 things. First, the Route 9 property in Glastonbury, the same lot Grandma showed me when I was 12. Gerald had rejected it 8 months ago, called it worthless. The asking price was $1.2 million. Current comparable sales in the area put it at 3 times that. Second, the Manhattan townhouse. Purchase price, $13.1 million. Funding source, Onslow Properties operating account. Titled to Sloane Onslow Personal. Company money. Personal asset. No board approval on record. Monday couldn't come fast enough. That evening, I sat cross-legged on my apartment floor with the yellow legal pad in my lap, drawing the same thing over and over, a timeline. Not of the trust, of Grandma. She set this up in 2015. I was 14. Sloane was 16 and already getting straight A's at the private school Dad paid $28,000 a year for. I was at the public school down the road, meeting with a reading specialist twice a week. Dad didn't pay for that. Grandma did. I remember the day she took me to Route 9, a Saturday in October. Leaves were orange and the field was nothing but mud and tall grass. She drove her old green Subaru with one hand on the wheel and a thermos of coffee in the other. Gerald looked at this lot last week, she said. He passed. Why? He sees acreage, square footage, dollar per foot. That's all he sees. She parked on the shoulder and we walked through the mud. My sneakers were ruined. She didn't care. What do you see, Thea? I looked, really looked. The slope catching morning light. The new elementary school under construction 2 miles south. The highway exit ramp that would bring commuters right past this spot. This is where people would want to wake up, I said, if somebody built the right homes. Grandma didn't answer right away. She just stood there with coffee steam curling around her chin, staring at the field like she'd found exactly what she was looking for. That's why I'm giving you the company, Thea. I was 14. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She was already talking to Margaret, already drafting the trust. She looked at her son, a man with an MBA and a corner office, and she looked at her granddaughter, who couldn't spell mortgage without autocorrect. And she chose the granddaughter. 11 years before this Monday morning, 5:45 a.m. I was already awake. I stood in front of the narrow closet in my studio and pulled out the one blazer I owned. Charcoal gray, fitted, bought 2 years ago for a job interview I never went to because Dad called the morning of and said he needed me at the office to cover the front desk. I put it on over a white blouse, black slacks, flat shoes, because I'd be standing for a while and I wanted to feel the ground under me. I looked in the mirror. For 3 years, I'd walked into Onslow Properties in khakis and a company polo, the administrative assistant dress code. Today I looked like someone who belonged in a boardroom. I drove to Coventry, parked in the back lot at 7:30, a full 90 minutes before the meeting. The building was quiet. Just the cleaning crew and the hum of the HVAC. I walked through the glass doors the same way I did every morning. Except today, I didn't turn left toward the copy room. I turned right toward the elevator and pressed 3. The receptionist, Dana, looked up. You have a meeting today? I do now. She blinked. I stepped into the elevator before she could ask anything else. Meanwhile, and I found this out later, Dad arrived at 8:15. Sloan was with him. He'd asked her to attend the board meeting as his guest so the directors could officially welcome the new VP of Acquisitions. He brought pastries from the French bakery on Main Street. He was in a charcoal suit and a burgundy tie. He was smiling. He had no idea his mother had rewritten the ending of his story 11 years ago. I sat alone in the third-floor conference room, Margaret's number on my phone, and I waited. 8:50, 8:52. The boardroom door swung open, and they filed in one by one. First, Harris Coleman, independent director, silver-haired, reading glasses, a retired banking executive who never said more than he needed to. Behind him, Linda Park, director number 2, a former commercial real estate attorney with a handshake that could crack walnuts. Then James Whitmore, the third independent, a soft-spoken accountant who'd been on the board since Grandma's time. Then Dad. He walked in like he owned the air in the room. Vivian behind him, tablet in hand, playing CFO. Sloan last, sitting in the guest chair near the window, legs crossed, smiling. Nobody looked at the far end of the table where I sat. They arranged pastries, poured coffee, shuffled folders. Dad cleared his throat. Good morning, everyone. Let's get started. Today we formalize Sloan's appointment as vice president of... The door opened. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. I heard the heels first. Measured, deliberate. Margaret Caldwell walked in carrying a leather attaché case. She stopped 2 steps inside the room and let the door close behind her. Every head turned. Dad's smile held for 3 more seconds, then began to thin. Thea? He looked at me, then at Margaret. This is a board meeting. You can't be in here. I stood. Actually, I can. I placed a folder, blue cover, certified seal, on the mahogany table and slid it toward the center. This is Margaret Caldwell, I said. Attorney for the Eleanor Onslow Irrevocable Trust. She's here as trustee. Silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums. Dad looked at Margaret. His jaw shifted. I watched the name register. Eleanor. His mother. The woman he hadn't mentioned in a board meeting since the day she died. His face didn't go red, it went white. Gerald Onslow did not become CEO of a $40 million company by folding under pressure. He recovered fast. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then his voice snapped back like a rubber band. I don't know what this is about, but this is my company. Mr. Onslow, Margaret said. She opened the attaché and placed a certified copy of the trust in front of each director. 5 copies, crisp, bound. This is a legal instrument executed by Eleanor Onslow in 2015, establishing an irrevocable trust holding 51% of Onslow properties. The sole beneficiary is Thea Onslow. The trust transferred as of 12 o'clock a.m., Saturday, Ms. Onslow's 25th birthday. Dad grabbed the nearest copy, flipped pages like a man looking for the lie. This is nonsense, he said. My mother was 81 when she... 70, Margaret corrected. She was 70 when the trust was executed, fully competent, notarized, witnessed by 2 independent parties, filed with the state of Connecticut. She never told me. She wasn't required to. Dad slammed the folder shut. This is clearly a fraudulent... Gerald. Harris Coleman's voice, quiet but heavy. He'd finished reading the first 3 pages. His glasses were off. This looks legitimate. We need to pause. Dad turned to him. Harris, you've known me for 15 years. I have, which is why I'm telling you to stop talking and let the attorneys review this. Vivian, who'd been frozen beside her tablet, finally spoke. This is ridiculous. Her voice was high, tight. Thea can't even write a proper email. Eleanor felt sorry for her. That's all this is. The words hit the room like a slap. Linda Park looked at Vivian. James Whitmore looked at the table. Sloane looked at nothing. And I sat still, hands flat on the mahogany, waiting. Because the thing about being underestimated your entire life is, when you finally speak, people aren't ready. Dad shifted tactics. The rage settled into something worse, the condescending tone, the one he uses when he wants to make you feel small without raising his voice. He turned to me the way you'd turn to a child who wandered into an adult conversation. Thea, sweetie. The word dripped. You don't understand business. You never have. Then he addressed the directors, hands open, voice even, performing reasonableness. Let me give you some context. My younger daughter has a learning disability. She struggles with basic reading and writing. For the past 3 years, she's been answering phones in this building. She has no management experience, no MBA, no track record. He paused for effect. Now, does that sound like someone who should own 51% of a $40 million company? He looked at each director in turn, waiting for nods, expecting agreement. My mother felt sorry for Thea, he continued. She always did. She saw Thea struggling and she wanted to help. That's admirable. But giving a controlling stake to a girl who can barely read a contract, that's not help. That's a liability. Sloane stared at the table, her fingers pressed white against the armrest. Vivian nodded from the side. Eleanor was always too soft when it came to Thea. James Whitmore shifted in his seat. Linda Park's pen had stopped moving. I let Dad finish. Every word. I didn't interrupt, didn't shake my head, didn't flinch. I let him build his case, the one he'd been building my whole life, the one where Thea is broken, the one where dyslexia means deficiency, the one where the only daughter worth investing in has a Harvard MBA and a red Tesla. He was done. The room was silent. 5 faces turned toward me. This was the moment. I stood, slowly, no rush. I have dyslexia. My voice came out lower than I expected, steady. That's true. I read slower than most people. I misspell things. I need software to get through a 50-page document. That's who I am. I paused, let it breathe. But let me tell you what I can do. I opened a second folder, the one I'd prepared Sunday night with diagrams, maps, and margin notes in my own hand. 3 months ago, I flagged a property on Route 9 in Glastonbury. Dad looked at it last year and rejected it, called it worthless. I slid a printout across the table. Satellite image, hand-drawn site analysis, comparable sales. Current comps show that lot is now valued at roughly 3 times the asking price we were quoted. I put this analysis together with pictures and maps because that's how my brain works. It works in space, not in sentences. Harris picked up the printout. Linda leaned in. I wasn't finished. Last quarter, I reviewed the company's transaction ledger, and I found that the Manhattan townhouse, the $13 million property Dad announced Saturday he's giving to Sloan, was purchased using company operating funds. Dead silence. Not personal funds, company funds, titled to Sloan Onslow individually, no board resolution, no shareholder approval. I looked at my father. That's a fiduciary breach, Dad. Gerald's mouth opened, closed, opened again. It was an investment decision. Margaret spoke. It was a personal asset transfer funded by corporate operating capital. The board was not notified, nor was approval sought. The documentation trail is clear. Harris Coleman set down his glasses. Gerald, is this true? The Manhattan property was purchased with company funds for Sloan's personal use? My father didn't answer. That silence was louder than anything he'd ever said about me. Gerald's fist hit the table hard enough to rattle the coffee cups. I built this company. Eleanor co-founded this company, Margaret replied. No change in volume. She held 51% at the time of trust creation. The transfer was fully within her legal rights. You went behind my back. Dad pointed at me, fingers shaking. You planned this. No, Dad. Grandma planned this. 11 years ago, because she saw what you refused to see. His face crumbled, not into sadness, into something raw. The face of a man watching control slip through his fingers for the first time in his life. Vivian stood up, tears already running. This is what you do to your family? After everything we gave you? I looked at my mother, the woman who let me ride alone in the second car, who told me there wasn't room up front, who watched my father pin my misspelled email on the bulletin board and didn't say a word. You gave me a copy machine and a $32,000 salary, I said. Grandma gave me a future. Vivian sat down. Sloane's voice came small, cracked. Thea, did you know about this? I turned to my sister. Her mascara was smudged at the corners. She looked young suddenly, young and confused. I found out 2 days ago, I said. Same day you got a Tesla and a $13 million house. She didn't reply. Her mouth trembled. She looked at Dad, then at me, then at the trust document in front of Harris Coleman. The room held still. James Whitmore had his pen cap in his mouth. Linda Park was staring at Gerald with an expression I can only describe as recalibration. Harris read another page. Nobody spoke for 12 seconds. I counted. Then Harris looked up and said, I think we need to vote. All right, can we just take a second? Because I'm standing in a boardroom, looking at my father's face as it hits him. His own mother chose me. Not Sloan. Me. The one he pinned that misspelled email on the break room wall for. The one he called "not built for this" in front of 200 strangers. Drop a comment if you've ever had a moment where someone finally saw you for who you really are. I want to hear it. And if you want to see what happens to the Manhattan deal and the future of this company, keep watching. Harris Coleman called the motion. Simple language, no dramatics. The board is asked to formally acknowledge the transfer of 51% of Onslow Properties shares to Thea Onslow, pursuant to the Eleanor Onslow Irrevocable Trust, effective March 15th of this year. Margaret distributed her final exhibit, a certification letter from the state of Connecticut confirming the trust's filing and validity. 11 years on record, no amendments, no challenges. Discussion? Harris asked. Gerald leaned forward. This board has operated under my leadership for 12 years. My mother's trust, whatever it says, doesn't change the fact that I built the operational. Gerald, Linda Park cut in, we're not debating your track record. We're acknowledging a legal transfer of shares. We don't have grounds to reject a valid trust instrument. James Whitmore nodded. I agree with Linda. The documentation is in order. Then let's vote, Harris said. All in favor of acknowledging the trust transfer. 3 hands went up. Harris, Linda, James. Opposed. Gerald raised his hand. Then Vivian slowly, as if the gesture cost her something. 3-2, the transfer is acknowledged. Harris wrote something on his legal pad. Let the record show, Thea Onslow is the majority shareholder of Onslow Properties, effective March 15th. Dad slumped back in his chair. Not dramatically, just 2 inches. 2 inches of a man whose foundation had shifted. Mom pressed her lips together and looked out the window. Sloane hadn't moved. She stared at the trust document like it was written in a language she didn't speak. Margaret spoke once more. For the record, as majority shareholder, Ms. Onslow has the right to call a shareholder review of all recent financial decisions. I took a breath. Thank you. I'd like to exercise that right, starting with the Manhattan property acquisition. Harris made a note. Acknowledged. Margaret laid it out with the precision of someone who'd spent 30 years reading the fine print. On December 14th of last year, Onslow Properties disbursed $13.1 million from its operating account for the purchase of a 4-story townhouse at 411 East 74th Street, Manhattan. The title was recorded in the name of Sloane Onslow, not the company. There is no board resolution authorizing this transaction, no shareholder approval, no memo classifying it as a corporate investment. She placed the transaction record in the center of the table. Linda Park picked it up first, read it twice, set it down. Gerald, this should have come before the board, you know that. It was going to be reclassified, Dad said. We were going to treat it as an investment property and it was a graduation gift. I didn't raise my voice. You said so yourself on Saturday, in front of 50 people. Mom said you were transferring it into Sloane's name this week. Vivian's eyes darted to Gerald, the kind of look that says, you told me no one would find out. Sloane's voice, thin. Wait, the house isn't... It's not actually mine? Nobody answered her. I'm requesting an independent audit, I said, of all company transactions exceeding $500,000 over the past 24 months. Harris looked at Linda. Linda looked at James. 3 nods. That's within your rights as majority shareholder, Harris said. We'll arrange it with an outside firm. Dad stood up, slowly. He looked at me, really looked, for maybe the first time since I was a child. Your grandmother always loved you more than me, he said. Quiet, almost to himself. No, Dad, I said. She just saw me. He picked up his coffee cup, found it empty, and walked out of the boardroom without another word. The directors filed out. Margaret excused herself to the hallway to make a call. The boardroom emptied until it was just me and Sloane, separated by 10 feet of mahogany and 25 years of imbalance. She sat in the guest chair by the window. Sunlight caught the edge of her cream blazer, the same one from Saturday. She hadn't changed. Maybe she hadn't slept either. Did you know, she asked, before Saturday? No. I found out the same moment you got the Tesla. She looked at her hands. I never asked for any of it. The car, the house. Dad just... He gave them to me. I thought it was normal. It was normal, I said. For you. She flinched, not at the words, but at the truth in them. I should have said something. Her voice cracked at the seam. At the graduation, when he made that joke, I should have said your name. Yeah, you should have. She pressed her fingers against her eyes. I'm sorry, Thea. I let the apology sit. I didn't rush to accept it. I didn't throw it back. I'm not doing this to hurt you, Sloane. I need you to know that. Then why? Because I'm done being invisible. She nodded, slowly, like she was beginning to understand a language she'd never needed before. What happens now? She asked. Now I do what Grandma asked me to do. I build. She stood, picked up her bag, stopped at the door. For what it's worth, that Route 9 analysis, I read it while you were talking. It was the smartest thing I've seen come out of this company in years. I didn't say thank you, not because I was ungrateful, because I was tired of being surprised that someone in my family noticed my work. She left. I stayed. The boardroom was quiet. I opened my legal pad and started writing. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, I was sitting in a chair that still smelled like Gerald's cologne. Not his office. I didn't take his office. I used the small conference room on the second floor, the one with the whiteboard and the window that looked out over the parking lot. Grandma's old office had been converted into a storage room years ago. I'd reclaim it eventually, but not today. Today was about process. Margaret sat across from me, walking me through the formal audit request letter. I signed it with a pen that felt heavier than it should have. Then I called Ray Whitfield. The Route 9 property, I said. Put together a full acquisition proposal. I want it on my desk by Friday. Silence. Then, you're serious? Dead serious. Use the site analysis I gave you. Comp data's current as of last week. Thea, I've been waiting 3 years for someone in this building to listen to you. Now someone is. I hung up and turned to Margaret. I need to set a few things in motion. I'm not firing anyone. I'm not restructuring the C-suite. But I want guardrails. She pulled out a legal pad. Go ahead. Every transaction over $500,000 requires full board approval. No exceptions, no verbal approvals. Documented votes only. She wrote. The Manhattan property gets returned to company ownership, or Gerald reimburses the purchase price from personal funds. She wrote. And I want the company's governance bylaws reviewed. Whatever Eleanor set up, whatever's been ignored, I want it followed. Margaret looked up. You sound like your grandmother. That's the point. I walked out of the conference room at 4:30. Dana, the receptionist, was still at her desk. She looked at me. Blazer, folder, a posture she'd never seen from me before. Good afternoon, Dana. She blinked. Good afternoon, Ms. Onslow. First time anyone at that front desk called me that. He showed up at 9:15 that night. I was on the floor of my studio, legal pad in my lap, drawing a rough site plan for Route 9, lot lines, drainage flow, the angle of winter sunlight on the eastern slope. The knock was sharp. 2 hits. I opened the door. Gerald Onslow, still in his suit, tie loosened, standing in the hallway of a building he'd never set foot in. He looked at the narrow stairwell behind him, like he wasn't sure how he'd gotten here. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He looked around. The fold-out desk, the second-hand bookshelf with audiobooks stacked sideways, the kitchen counter barely wide enough for a cutting board. And on the wall, taped in a row, my hand-drawn maps. Route 9, the old Saybrook parcel, a mixed-use concept for a lot in Middletown that I'd sketched on a napkin 6 months ago. His eyes stayed on Route 9 the longest. You could have told me, he said, instead of doing this in front of the whole board. Would you have listened? He didn't answer. We both knew. I didn't know your grandmother had... Grandma spent 11 years planning this, Dad. You spent 25 years telling me I was nothing. He exhaled, not a sigh, more like something deflating. We can work together, he said. Share the decision-making, 50-50. No, I own 51%, and I intend to lead. But you can stay as CEO if you follow the bylaws. He stared at me. I held it. Then he stood, moved toward the door, and paused in front of the Route 9 map. He studied the lot lines, the sunlight angles I'd hand-drawn in yellow marker, the school notation to the south. His jaw worked. He said nothing, but something behind his eyes shifted, a flicker of recognition he would never, ever speak aloud. He left without closing the door. I closed it myself. Tuesday, 8 a.m. My phone rang. Mom. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered. Thea. Her voice was thick, swollen. She'd been crying, or she wanted me to think she had. With Vivian, the line between the two was never clear. Mom. You're tearing this family apart. Do you understand that? Your grandmother would be ashamed of what you're doing. Grandma is the one who gave me this, Mom. A wet exhale. Eleanor was confused. She was old. She made a mistake. She filed the trust when she was 70. Her attorney confirmed full mental competency. It's been on record for 11 years. Silence. The crying strategy wasn't working, so she shifted. Think about what people will say. Her voice hardened. The Onslow name means something in this community. You're going to drag it through the mud. The Onslow name was built by a woman who couldn't get a bank loan in 1987 because she was female. Grandma stood in that banker's office and put her house up as collateral. She didn't care what people said. Silence. You'll regret this, Thea. Cold now. The real Vivian. Maybe, but I won't regret being invisible anymore. She hung up. Not me. Her. She needed the last gesture, even when she'd lost the argument. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter. My hand was shaking. My eyes were wet. I won't pretend otherwise. She's still my mother, the woman who brushed my hair when I was small, who drove me to my reading specialist before she decided I wasn't worth the investment. You don't stop wanting your mother's approval. You just learn to stop needing it. I wiped my face, poured coffee, and opened the Route 9 file. There was work to do. 2 weeks later, the independent audit came back. The firm, Hayes and Whitaker, out of Hartford, delivered a 40-page report to the board. The headline finding, Gerald Onslow had used Onslow Properties operating funds for personal expenditures totaling $2.14 million over the past 24 months. The Manhattan townhouse was the largest item, $13.1 million in company funds, now flagged as an unauthorized personal transfer. But the report also cited 3 other incidents. A kitchen renovation at the family home, billed to the company as office improvements. A lease on a Range Rover classified as a client relations vehicle, but driven exclusively by Vivian. A family vacation to Turks and Caicos, booked through the company travel account. The board met on a Thursday. I attended. Margaret attended. Gerald sat at the end of the table in a suit that didn't fit him the way it used to. Something about his posture had changed. Not broken exactly, but rearranged. Harris Coleman read the findings aloud. Then, Gerald, the board recommends full reimbursement of all flagged expenditures. Failure to comply within 60 days will result in formal legal action on behalf of the company. Dad stared at the table. I'll reimburse. The Manhattan property will be retitled to Onslow Properties, Linda added. Effective immediately. Understood. That was it. No shouting, no theatrics, just a man sitting in a room watching the bill come due. After the meeting, I got a text from Sloan. I'm moving back to the apartment I had before. It's okay. I think I needed to earn something on my own for once. I read it twice, typed back. I think so too. She sent a thumbs up emoji. Then, the Route 9 thing, when does that break ground? I smiled for the first time in 2 weeks. 3 months after that boardroom meeting, I stood on Route 9 in Glastonbury, mud on my boots, wind pulling at my hair, and watched a bulldozer carve the first cut into the earth. We'd acquired the property for $900,000, $300,000 below asking. I'd negotiated directly with the seller, a retired contractor named Bill Henning, who told me over coffee that he'd been waiting years for someone to see the potential in that land. Your grandmother brought me coffee on this exact lot once, he said. 1992. I always hoped an Onslow would come back. The development plan. 45 single-family homes. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, designed for young families and first-time buyers. I drew the initial site layout myself. Each lot angled to catch morning light, walking paths connecting to the school 2 miles south, a community garden at the center. Ray Whitfield stood beside me as the surveyor planted stakes. "You designed all this?" Ray asked, looking at the blueprint. "On a legal pad in my apartment." He shook his head. "Your grandmother would be proud. She'd say I'm just getting started." The board approved the project unanimously. Even Gerald voted yes. He didn't comment during the presentation, just listened, read the projections, and raised his hand when Harris called the vote. I named the development Eleanor Place because she saw it first. 30 years ago, she stood on this same muddy field and told her son it had potential. He didn't listen. She brought her granddaughter instead, and I told her where the sunlight fell. Pre-sales opened within a month. 32 of the 45 lots sold within 6 weeks. The waitlist had 14 names. Eleanor Place was the first project in Onslow Properties history conceived, designed, and approved by someone who couldn't read a spreadsheet without assistive software. And it was working. Let me be honest about Gerald. He didn't apologize. He didn't have a tearful revelation. He didn't show up at my door with flowers and a speech about how wrong he'd been. That's the movie version. This is real life. Gerald Onslow remained CEO of Onslow Properties. He came to work every day in the same suits, drank the same coffee, sat in the same chair. He ran meetings. He managed contractors. He signed checks, though now every check over $500,000 required board co-approval. But something changed. Small. Almost invisible. Like a crack in a wall that only shows when the light shifts. He started forwarding me documents. No cover note, no greeting. Just the raw file and a one-word subject line. FYI. A zoning report for a lot in Middletown. A cost analysis for a mixed-use project in New Haven. A demographic study for Fairfield County. He never said, "What do you think?" He didn't need to. The act of sending was the question. Vivian stepped down from her CFO title. Voluntarily, the press release said. The board hired Catherine Webb, a CPA with 20 years of commercial real estate experience, to replace her. Catherine didn't know about family dynamics. She knew about numbers. That was exactly what we needed. Mom didn't disappear. She still came to company events, still sat next to Gerald at dinners. But she no longer spoke in board meetings, and she stopped calling me to cry. One evening, late, after a 12-hour day reviewing construction bids, I checked my email. One new message from g.onslow@onslowproperties.com. Subject, Route 9. Body, the plan is good. No sign-off, no name. I listened to the text-to-speech, read it twice. Then I saved the email to a folder I named Progress. I didn't reply. Some things don't need a response. They just need to be received. A Saturday, September, 6 months after the boardroom. I drove to Margaret's office in West Hartford, a brownstone with ivy crawling up the east side and a brass plaque by the door. She met me in the conference room with 2 cups of tea and Grandma's letter. "Would you read it one more time?" I asked. Margaret smoothed the pages on the table and began. "Thea, if you're reading this, then today is your 25th birthday, and I'm no longer around to say this in person." I closed my eyes and listened, the way I've always listened best. You see what others can't. You always have. You look at a piece of land and you see the neighborhood it could become. You look at people and you see who they really are. Margaret's voice was steady, professional, but when she reached the last paragraph, it softened. "Don't let anyone reduce you to a label, Thea. Dyslexia is not a flaw. It is a different way of seeing, and the world needs people who see differently, especially in rooms full of people who all see the same way." She paused. "The best person isn't the fastest reader. It's the one who sees the farthest." I opened my eyes. The letter sat on the table between us. 2 pages of my grandmother's handwriting, loops and curves that I'd never be able to read myself, but that I'd memorize through someone else's voice. "Thank you, Margaret." She nodded. "Eleanor wrote this when you were 14. She revised it twice. The last revision was 3 months before she died. 3 months. She was already sick by then, and she spent some of that time rewriting a letter to a granddaughter she wouldn't see turn 25. I drove home with the windows down. On the kitchen counter sat the email Dad had pinned to the bulletin board years ago. I still kept it. But now it was just paper. 6 months in, and here's what the numbers look like. Eleanor Place. 70% of units sold before framing was complete. Revenue projections exceeded initial estimates by 18%. The town of Glastonbury featured the development in their annual growth report, calling it a model of community-centered residential design. Onslow Properties. Overall, 22% revenue increase year over year. The independent audit led to tighter financial controls, which, ironically, made the company more attractive to outside investors. Harris Coleman told me after a board meeting, "Lenders trust us more now. Transparency does that." I hired an accessibility consultant named Priya Desmond. Her first week, she reformatted every internal document into dual mode, written text alongside audio summaries and visual flowcharts. Training materials got the same treatment. "If my brain works differently," I told her, "then someone else's probably does too. I don't want anyone at this company to feel like they have to hide how they think." Priya redesigned our onboarding packet. 3 new hires that quarter told HR the visual format helped them understand company policy faster than any previous employer. I moved out of the studio in East Hartford. My new apartment was in Glastonbury, a 2-bedroom near the Eleanor Place construction site. I paid for it myself, from dividends. I didn't buy a Tesla. I bought a 10-year-old Ford F-150 with 80,000 miles on it, because I needed a truck that could carry site plans and occasionally haul materials to the project. The passenger seat was permanently covered in rolled-up blueprints. On the dashboard, I stuck a yellow Post-it note. 3 words in my own handwriting, letters crooked and imperfect. "See what matters." Every morning, it's the first thing I read. People ask me all the time, "Have you forgiven your parents?" Here's what I've learned. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's not something you flip on a Tuesday afternoon and suddenly the past weighs nothing. It's a process. Some days I'm closer. Some days I hear my father's voice in a boardroom saying, "Not everyone is built for this," and my chest tightens like it did in that Harvard auditorium. But I've done something harder than forgiveness. I've set boundaries. Here's what that looks like in practice. Family dinners happen. I show up. But the first time someone makes a comment about my reading, about my spelling, about my limitations, I leave. No argument, no speech. I just stand up, put on my coat, and drive home. It's happened twice. Both times nobody followed me. Both times the next dinner was quieter. Gerald wants to talk business? He schedules a meeting. Through my assistant. During work hours. I don't take calls from my father at 9 p.m. anymore. He's my CEO and I'm his majority shareholder. We are professionals. Mom, Vivian, tested the boundary once, called me crying, saying I was destroying the family name. I said what I needed to say. She didn't call again for 3 weeks. When she did, she asked about Eleanor Place, not about my feelings, about the project. That's progress, even if it's small. Sloan left Onslow Properties. She took a position at a development firm in Stamford, applied on her own, interviewed on her own, got it on her own. We talk once a week. Short calls, surface level mostly. We're not close yet. We might never be the way sisters should be, but we're trying, and trying counts. I love my family. I do. But love doesn't mean letting people use you as a punchline. Look, I'm not telling you this story so you'll feel sorry for me. I had a grandmother who spent 11 years making sure I'd have a shot. That's more than a lot of people get. I know that. I'm telling you this because somewhere out there, someone is sitting in the back row of their own life. Maybe not at a Harvard graduation, maybe at a family dinner, a team meeting, a parent-teacher conference, sitting in the back, being told, in words or in silence, that they're not enough. And I want to tell that person something. You might not have a grandmother who left you 51% of a company. I got lucky in ways I didn't earn. But here's what I know you have: the right to define yourself. For 25 years, I let my family tell me what I was: the dumb one, the slow one, the one who can't even write a proper email. I wore those labels like a uniform I didn't choose. And the worst part? I almost believed them. My dyslexia isn't a weakness, it's a different operating system. I can't read a contract at normal speed, but I can stand on a muddy lot and see a neighborhood that doesn't exist yet. I can't spell acquisition without spell check, but I can hear what the numbers in a spreadsheet are trying to say. Once I stopped trying to run everyone else's software, I started to see clearly. So if your family calls you the dumb one, or the slow one, or the difficult one, consider the possibility that you're just the different one, and different might be exactly what the room needs. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out the old email, the one Dad pinned to the bulletin board. I still carry it, not because it hurts, because it reminds me how far I've come. So that's my story. A few hours ago, I was in that boardroom, watching my father realize his own mother chose me, watching the directors vote to acknowledge what Grandma Eleanor set in motion more than a decade ago, watching Sloane understand, for the first time, what it costs to be the invisible one. And now I'm here, talking to you. Eleanor Place breaks ground on Phase 2 next month. 45 more homes. This time, I'm designing a community center at the entrance, a space where people can gather. I'm naming it after Bill Henning, the contractor who waited 30 years for someone to see what he saw in that land. My dad still sends one-line emails. No greeting, no sign-off, just FYI and a document. I read every one. I don't always